Today is Palm Sunday. Before we move on, let's bless the palms. And if you want an extra one to take for somebody else, let me know, and Simon will give you one. And if not, you can pick it up later. Okay, good. In that case, let's lift our palms. Most holy and loving and extraordinary God, we remember the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem, and how everyday people came out to greet him with palms and to lay their coats before him. And right now we lift these palms to you and ask you that you bless them. That you bless the palms, that you bless the hands that hold them and the hearts that reach out through them, so we may remember that it's our hearts that we lay before the one who rides in triumph. And it's our hearts that we give. And it's our hearts that you accept. Holy One, just as they lay palms before you as you rode into Jerusalem, we lay our lives before you, knowing that you accept us, that you love us, that you have a plan for us, that, Holy One, you cherish us, and that we can trust in you and in the extraordinary gift of your kingdom which you bring. So be a blessing upon these and upon us, we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
So of course today was the first day in Passover week, and Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, a colt. And people came out to welcome him because they were quite rightly excited. And why were they quite rightly excited? Because the previous couple of days, do you remember what happened? Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead. And all the story had gone around Jerusalem, so they all knew who he was when he rode into Jerusalem. We know that story. So what happened on the second day of Passover week? What happened tomorrow? Well, I'll tell you in a little bit. Firstly, I want to share a story with you. It's a bit of an admission, but you know that I work part-time, and the company that I work for recently did some restructuring. And basically, when a company restructures, there's all these new rules and regulations, there's the new paperwork, there's the new people who are in charge of this and the people who are in charge of that. And if you're kind of, on the bottom there, like I am, then it kind of just seems like a whole load of just stuff just happening around you just to make life a bit more difficult. But anyway, they called this big meeting, and unfortunately they called it on a Monday, which isn't the day that I work. And although they offered overtime, I had something else I had to do, so I couldn't go in. And I'm trying to say that without smiling too much. So I couldn't go to the meeting. But later in the week, on Thursday, my new manager decided that she would come and visit me and tell me all about the changes. Well, I've got to explain, first of all, in my own defence, I was suffering with some neuralgia. And if you've had neuralgia, it's kind of like the worst toothache in the world. So I was quite literally a bear with a sore head. I mean, quite literally. And she came in and she talked excitedly about all these new changes and about what was going to happen and who was doing what and why and what we had to do now, and we had to phone this number instead of that number, and fax this person instead of that person. And it kind of went on. And then as I was kind of fading out, she brought out the review form and said, these have slipped a bit over the years, but we're now going to do the annual review, the proper one, so here we are. And she gave me this thing, this tome, this volume, that you're supposed to fill in, and you fill in all these little bits. There's a question, are you enjoying your job? And you explain why you're enjoying it, and then I think they take it away and they put their comments in, and then you get together and you talk about it. So it's kind of like an hour to sit there and write it all out, and then, bless her, she has an hour to write all her stuff out, and then the two of you sit down and you talk about it for an hour. And I said, okay, fair enough, but you do know that all this is just nonsense, don't you? I didn't use the word nonsense, but we're in church and I'm on camera, so let's use the word nonsense. So I said, you do know this is nonsense, don't you? And she went, no, it's not. And I'm like, oh, it is. I used to be an engineer, you know. I had a group of 30 engineers, so I know exactly what it's like to be in your position. I know what it's like to have to execute company policy. It's just absolute nonsense. and she said, no, it's not. It's really useful, blah, 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 and went off on this, you know, the zeal of the recently converted to a new post kind of thing. And I said, okay, just tell me one reason why this review would be useful. And she said, well, if it turned out that you were doing something wrong, then this would give us the opportunity to talk about it. And I said, honey, if I'm doing something wrong and you wait a year to tell me about it, that's a problem. There's something wrong there. But anyway, short and tall of it is I pretty well lost it. And not badly, but I did kind of lose it. And the next day, I phoned her up and said, look, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to, you know, lose it with you yesterday, but I had this neuralgia and it was just difficult, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you know what, just do what you're told, Mike. Just get on with it, because, you know, that's what you're there for, and blah, 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 blah. There's a part of me that kind of feels guilty for kind of having gone off on one. And whether I was right to go off on one or wrong to go off on one, and in this case I think I was probably wrong, but if I was right to, I still have that feeling of, oh, you know what, I shouldn't do that. I really shouldn't go off on one, because it's not a good thing to do. It's not a Christian thing to do. Except the second day of the week for Jesus. Today's Sunday, the first day of the week, first day of Passover week. Second day, he goes to the temple. And when he gets to the temple, he walks in to find that the court of Gentiles, which is the space that's put aside for anybody who's Jewish, anybody who's not Jewish, sorry, to go and worship God, during Passover week, that they've set up a marketplace there. And it's a bit difficult to kind of get your head around what this must have felt like to Jesus. But you have to remember a couple of things. Firstly, the Pharisees run the temple. And the Pharisees are such a stickler for law. They've already had Jesus to one side and said, you do know that your disciples are picking grains of wheat as they walk through the fields on a Sabbath. They're not supposed to do that. That's against God's law. God's not going to be happy with you. And then they've said, you know, you're healing someone on the Sabbath. You're supposed to do that during the week. God will not be happy with you because it's God's law. And that includes bringing somebody back from the dead. Not supposed to do that on the Sabbath. Do it during the week because God won't be happy with you. And then Jesus walks in, and here's these people who have all these rules and regulations that they lay on everybody else, and they've just ignored a huge one by putting a market right in the middle of the court of Gentiles. A marketplace. Because they needed the space. Because it earns some extra revenue. Because it brings some money in for the temple. And Jesus goes in there, and he sees it, and he loses it completely. So he turns over the tables of the money changers. He makes a whip out of cords and he thrashes them out. And if you read the section of Matthew 21 and of John 2, you read of this righteous anger that Jesus has. He completely loses it. These are the people who've said, if you catch a woman in adultery, then you really have to stone her to death, whether or not it's her fault. These are the same people who said, you mustn't talk to a Samaritan woman, you mustn't talk to her even if you need to draw water from a well. All these rules you've got to keep, because it suits us. But the ones that we don't want to keep, then we won't bother keeping. Imagine going to London for Easter. You decide to visit St. Paul's Cathedral for the Easter worship service. But you find that actually when you walk in, they've turned the hall into a restaurant. You ask where you can go to worship, and you're told that there is a worship service going on. However, the area is cordoned off, and it's only for regular attendees, for people who tithe to the cathedral and who worship regularly at the cathedral. And the only place that you're allowed to worship really is, we'd suggest that you buy some coffee and you sit and pray. How would you feel? Part of us would feel really angry. Part of us would want to go off on one. Jesus did. Completely and utterly. So there are times to lose it. There are times in the face of hypocrisy, in the face of injustice, in the face of prejudice. When Syrian families are horrifically killed by chemical weapons, that's time to go off on one. When America decides to go bombing just to flex a bit of muscle, that's time to go off on one. When Chechnyan gays and lesbians are tortured and killed because of state-sponsored homophobia, that's time to go off on one. When one of the richest countries in the world, and that's us, by the way, turn a blind eye to those amongst us who have the most need, that's the differently abled, mentally ill, the homeless, those are times to lose it. And in fact, Jesus models that for us. Of course, he didn't just lose it because of some corporate nonsense that was inconvenient and tiresome. But I suspect that even if he didn't, he must have known at some level what it's like to be a bear with a sore head. Amen.
Amen.